So I don't usually give my sermons a title, but if I were on this one, it would be just 28 more repenting days until Christmas. John the Baptist brings us into this season. So how far is Christmas? It's longer than you think. It was centuries before the birth of Christ, before Christians ever thought about celebrating that day. When the church began celebrating, it took over the pagan holiday, winter solstice, which celebrated the dying and the rising of the sun. And so the birth of the one of light made sense. And so they took over that holiday. So if you're concerned that culture has taken over Christmas, well, they need to get in line. It's happened before. How far? How far? First Christmas pageant was in 1223, done by St. Francis of Assisi to help the poor folks understand the story. How far? Many in the New World would not celebrate Christmas. The Pilgrims thought Christmas was a popish frivolity, and they thought it had its roots in nature religion. After all, you gather around the tree, right? Well, the legislature of the Massachusetts Bay Colony on May 11, 1659, enacted a law which stated, "Whosoever shall be found observing any such day as Christmas shall pay for every offense 5 shillings. 39 years before that, when on the first Christmas of the New World, the Pilgrims spent their day felling trees. Judge Samuel Sewall declared that anyone who made mince pie or plum pudding over the holidays would surely be cursed by God for all eternity. I kind of agree with that one, but for much different reasons. Yeah. In 1681, the law banning Christmas was repealed, but children in Massachusetts still were required to go to school on Christmas Day until 1856. How far? Isaiah says, animals will be vegetarians and they will be friends. How far? Isaiah 41 says, God will make justice shine on the nations, will make justice shine on the earth, will make justice shine on every race. Attitudes of racism and classism still run rampant. How far? So John says, welcome to Advent, the time of waiting, the time of looking for God's kingdom. The main characters of Advent are Isaiah and John the Baptist. Their pronouncement runs counter to our wishes. They intrude upon our Christmas. We don't want to hear it. The Swiss man Jean-Francois Vernetti is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records 2004 edition. Anyone know what he did? Of course you don't. So let me tell you. In his travels to 131 countries, Vernetti amassed a collection of 2,915 do not disturb signs in a variety of languages. His dream is to collect signs from all 191 countries of the world. Dream big. Do not disturb. That's kind of that universal statement, leave me alone. What? Let it be. Don't rock the boat. I don't want to hear it. But then comes the prophets Isaiah and John with disturbing words. The words of hope. Remember when you were in school and the principal broke in on the intercom with something important? Or your favorite show was interrupted for a special announcement? Announcement is an adrenaline-filled word. Can I have your attention, please? And everyone stops. Well, little Johnny was going to be part of his church's Christmas play. He only had one line, but it was an important one. It was that angelic announcement. Behold, I bring glad tidings of great joy. And so he worked on that for a month. His family helped him. He was all ready, and then came the night of production. The church was packed. He went out on stage ready to give his pronouncement. He froze. The congregation just kind of waited to see what would happen. And finally, after a long, long pause, he raised his hand and said, "Boy, do I have good news for you." Nearly 2,000 years before that, another Johnny had much the same thing to say about the same event. John announces the coming of the Prince of Peace. John announces the coming of the reign of God. Now, even though John looked and ate like some kind of wild man, people responded. They went out in droves to him, all kinds of people. Peace, the kingdom of heaven, repent. But not so fast. You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you? As John looked out among the crowd, he noticed the religious people, those who knew they were in great shape because they were good Methodists, because they were nice. So they came out just to hear this message that was going to get their neighbor. And John looked at them in the eye and said, "Who do you think you are? Who told you to come here?" And blew them around to come. Do you think it comes without a cost? Then he continues, "Do you think I'm tough? Wait till the one who comes after me comes. I use water, but he uses fire." John was rough. It's a baseball fan who went out to get some popcorn. On his way back, he said to the lady on the aisle, as he was going to go past her, "Did I step on your feet when I walked past you?" And she was ready to accept his apology. He said, "Well, yes, you did." He said, "Good, then I got the right row," and he went straight to her. John was not just different and odd, he was abrasive. He was abrasive. But here's the thing. He was right. A pastor said, "I got pretty bold preaching on this text last time around. I paraphrased Matthew. Don't say to yourselves, 'My grandfather built this church.' I tell you, God can raise Methodists out of stone." Whether or not he has, we won't go into that. John was not the kind of pastor you would invite back a second time. He ticked people off. And worse yet, he was right. John was divinely insane. You can't talk to or reason with someone who is insane. He was divinely insane. Nothing to lose. There's something about mad prophets that recognize our needs and our shortcomings, and they call them out. And I hate it when that happens. See, mad prophets aren't intrigued by or tied to the things of this world like we are. So they can point out how silly or misplaced trust can be. A man went to see his doctor for a physical. He got back home, he looked sort of glum, and his wife said, "Well, what did the doctor say to you?" He said, "He told me that if I want to stay healthy, I have to eat what I don't want, have to drink what I don't like, and do what I'd rather not do." Right? Some of you have been to that doctor. Just because it's the truth doesn't mean we want to hear it. That's how we respond to John the Baptist. We especially don't want to hear from a wild man, a homeless guy who's on the street corner. Just not ready to hear. It's a man who spent his whole life in the desert. One day he came into town to visit a friend. He stopped along the railroad tracks. He'd never seen a train before. He didn't know what that was about. And he had stopped there and he heard this whistling sound. Well, we know it's a train, but he didn't know. So he got hit. But it was just a glancing blow, and it knocked him a ways off, and he had some internal bleeding, some broken bones, and some bruises. After a few weeks in the hospital recovering, he went to his friend's house for a party. During the party, he heard in the kitchen the tea kettle started whistling. So he went to a closet, he grabbed a baseball bat, and he started pounding that thing until it was just a clump of iron. His friend rushed in to see what was going on and said, "Why'd you ruin my good tea kettle?" The man replied, "You got to kill those things when they're small." That's John the Baptist's message to us. You got to kill those things while they're small, before they take hold. Anger, resentment, self-destructive habits, false trust. We must deal with them while they're small, before we become captive to them. John says, repent. Look within yourself. Examine your life. See if there are changes you need to make. Make them in preparation for Christ. Late Dr. George Buttrick, from many, many years ago, great pastor, theologian, he tells about an early camping trip they took. In those days, the roads were all gravel and dirt. And on a good day, travelers could maybe go 100 miles. Well, they'd gone on this camping trip, and on the way home, they were attempting to reach home in one long drive. You know how that is. You've been out for a long time. You just want to get home. Don't want to stop anywhere. So it was about midnight. It was raining. The visibility was poor, and the headlights didn't work very well in those days. But they were amazed. They hit a nice patch of road. They all mentioned it to each other, how smooth it was. And they noticed that there were a few curves here and there, but mostly it was calm and it was straight. So after driving many miles, not seeing any signs that told them where they were, they began to get a little anxious. And they noticed that every turn was to the left. So Buttrick stopped the car, got out, began looking around, only to discover that they had gotten off the main road and gotten onto a racetrack. They were going round and round and round, seeing the same sights dimly in the rain. Somehow, that is how we have gotten. And that's John's message to us. What road have you been on that leads nowhere? What have you passed over and over again? John calls us to notice our lives at a deep level and to take responsibility. We've been going off and around in circles, thinking we're making great time. And each Advent, we find ourselves passing John the Baptist. John announces the message of peace and the coming kingdom. But he says there's a cost. You have to change. We have to turn from our own way and return to God. It's not always easy. A man was invited to a Christmas party, and the theme of the party was everyone was to bring a gag gift. And so he looked through all of his belongings, trying to find the right gag gift. And finally he did. He found a small taco warmer made of straw. And on it had the letters scrawled TACOS, scrawled flimsily in yarn. The perfect gift, he thought to himself. He wrapped it up and he headed for the party. That evening, as it was unwrapped, a good laugh was had by everyone. The next morning, he told this story to his family as they had gathered around the breakfast table. Even before he finished the story, however, he noticed tears streaming down his precious daughter's face. Suddenly, he remembered. It had been a gift from her to him several years ago. He found himself weeping with his daughter. Suddenly, that taco box was no longer a gag gift. It was more precious than silver, and he wished he had it back. In that moment, God spoke to him and said, "How often have you forgotten the valuable gift I gave you? I gave you the most precious thing I have. I gave you my heart. I gave you my son." John calls us to remember the gift of God. Calls us to set aside all those things that are of far less value in our lives. Prepare. Set straight your path, your priorities. Behold, the reign of God begins. Remember, there are just 28 more repenting days.